All right. Hello, where are we? What is our episode number? Yeah, welcome to Season 4, Episode 8, also known as Episode 119 of the Retro Game Club podcast. I'm Hugh, and joining me is someone whose Club Penguin fake site was just shut down. Rob.
Yeah, I actually have federal agents at the door right now. It's a federal offense, apparently.
That's what happens when you upset Disney. I mean, I feel like if I ran a fake version of any other obsolete online like community. No, I know because Club Penguin, it involves kids, so obviously perhaps the FBI is involved for those reasons. I don't feel like the police would actually come. I think I would get a takedown letter and that would be the end of it. But I guess if you're stealing Disney property, that's
yeah, they go nuts. What have you been up to?
Not much. Speaking of Disney property, I know it's already Christmas season, and Hallmark announced all their ornaments for 2022. This is a real thing. This is not like an April Fool's thing.
Wow. Okay.
But this is definitely we want all your money year again. So if you browse it, they have a Breath of the Wild ornament that's coming out. A Sega Genesis with Sonic 2 cartridge ornament.
Ooh.
It looks pretty nice. And then if you're into Star Wars, they have a bunch of the Baby Yoda show ornaments.
That's an easy money grab right there. Those things, ornaments are expensive.
Yeah, well, so I looked at it and I'm like, okay, if I add this up, that's $200.
Yeah, for something that just hangs for a few days.
Yeah, yeah. They have a Matrix one here, some Doctor Who stuff, and then, spoiler alert for the last episode of Mandalorian, they have a beloved classic Star Wars figure, character that appears in the last episode of Mandalorian there as well.
Wow.
So, it's I just racked up my head. It's $150 for all the Mandalorian ornaments, I think.
Hopefully they made the face of that character look very deep faked.
It kind of does, yeah. Yeah. Video game wise, like I said, they have Sega Genesis. I think I mentioned Breath of the Wild. Those were kind of the big ones that jumped out at me. Some Pokemon ones. There wasn't last year, I think they had more video game stuff than they have this year.
Yeah, they had a lot of Nintendo stuff, and I picked up a few. They also had a lot of Sonic stuff too, but what was I going to say about that? Also, yeah, 2022 around that time, maybe Breath of the Wild 2 will almost be coming out. So
almost. Yeah, by December 2022, we should know the next delay for it at least.
Or what system it'll come out on.
Yeah, good. Is it going to be the Switch? Is it going to be PlayStation 5? Who knows? I was thinking about going to get the Sonic 2 Happy Meal toys, but they look pretty bad. Did you look at them online?
No, I didn't. You messaged that to me. I forgot to look at them. Are they just...
Yeah, they're bad. It's not worth the intestinal discomfort to get these toys. They just look really kind of cheap and I don't know. I'm not impressed. So I'm probably not going to get them.
Did they have toys for the first movie? I can't remember.
I don't recall. Remember that was right at the start of quarantine. So was it safe to get takeout? Would you die of coronavirus if you got a Happy Meal? I don't know.
True. Yeah. You'd have to bleach your Happy Meal first.
Yeah. I was actually planning to take my daughter to see Sonic and then everything shut down in Illinois.
Huh. Yeah. That was the last movie we saw before it shut down here.
Yeah, see, I like to wait until the theaters aren't packed, which was my mistake. And then, have you heard the story this week about Pac Mom?
Yeah, yes, I was hoping you would bring it up. Do you want to tell our listeners who Pac Mom is?
Yeah, so I guess now that Miss Pac-Man is 40, she's been rebranded as Pac Mom. That's the gist of it. So there is, this sort of weird copyright and royalties issue around Miss Pac-Man. And it's Namco Bandai owns the character Miss Pac-Man, but because of some old contracts and things getting acquired and bought and sold, apparently At Games somehow owns the royalties for Miss Pac-Man, but not the character.
Okay.
Very confusing to me. Someone smarter than me can explain the details. And Bandai Namco absolutely hate @games. So they don't want to use Miss Pac-Man anymore because it means they would owe @games some percentage of royalties related to things that contain Miss Pac-Man, even though it's their copyright.
Yeah.
So imagine I created a character, right? So I created some superhero. I don't know what he's called. Blue Thunderstrike. That's the name of my character, right? And I own the copyright, but you're like, you want to take a gamble. You think that Blue Thunderstrike will make like $1 billion, and I think he's not going to make anything. So you purchase the royalties from me for like $1 million. Right? And I'm like, $1 million? What a chump. My character's never going to make $1 million. It's some kind of arrangement like that.
Yeah.
And it got bought and sold a few times and ended up with, I believe, @games as the owner. So rather than continue to use Miss Pac-Man, they reskinned her and renamed her Pac-Mom. Which, when I saw that name, I'm like, isn't that Pac-Man's mom?
Yeah, like Pac-Wife would be more accurate, right?
Yes, it would be more accurate. You could go with like Pac-Partner if you didn't want to offend anybody.
Pac-At.
Or I guess offend different people. I don't really know. Like, you could have just given her a name. She could have just been like Becky or something, right?
Is this all more than just in Pac-Land? Because I only heard about this happening in Pac-Land.
I believe there was something about this also being an issue in the other games on the Pac-Man Museum that have Miss Pac-Man.
Weird.
So I think that'd be like Baby and Junior Pac-Man.
Huh.
So Miss Pac-Man was born in 1982, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think the most popular girl's name of 1982 was? It should be super easy.
Kelly.
No, Jennifer.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
With like 900
Jenners? Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I know you were born before 82, but I'm just saying, like, that was the most popular name from like 1970 something to the mid 80s.
Yeah.
So you could have just renamed her Jenny or something. I don't know. Like, you could have just. I get you're sticking with the Pac motif. I guess you could have gone Pac Woman, maybe. I don't know. I don't really know that I have a better suggestion. All I know is Pac Mom seems like the worst one you could have picked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because again, I would assume if if you had Pac Mom and Pac Dad, those are Pac-Man's parents.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Unless there's a Grumpy Kong, Donkey Kong kind of situation happening now.
Yeah, maybe. I don't really know how the Pac characters age. So she'd be what, 40 now. She'd be turning 40 this year. So, probably teenage kids, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is the dumbest controversy, I think, in gaming in a while. And retro gaming in a while.
Yep, but it made all the news sites, including our podcast.
Yeah. That's a lot. What are you even up to?
Oh, man. So let's see. One of my items we'll be talking about in the topic. What else? Oh, so a long time ago, I mentioned it in this podcast, I think. I ordered some used games from GameStop. Mm-hmm. They are kind of more expensive, rare games, and they were for a decent price. So I bought them, and one came in a GameStop case, pretty much like a Blockbuster case, and the other one literally had dog tooth marks in the case. Mm-hmm. So I emailed them and I said, no dice, this is not what was advertised. And their support was very helpful. Like, hey, you keep those for free. We're going to send you new ones. And weeks went by and I just said, hey, just checking in on this. And they said, yeah, it's a stocking issue. Those are kind of hard to come by games we figured out, yada, yada, yada. Just once they're in stock, again, when someone brings them in, we'll send them right to you. And so they eventually sent me the same games again, except both in GameStop cases.
Oh, I thought you said one had been chewed on by a ferret.
Yeah, this time it was just GameStop cases. So I said again, like, hey, this happened again. I'm not trying to scam you or anything. And this time, I think he moved the help ticket to the manager, and they said, well, if you read the fine print, yada, 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 we don't guarantee cases in used games from GameStop.com.
Yeah, I think I knew that.
So, A, I thought their support was very good, but B, I will never buy a GameStop used game online again, just because I like having the real case, But they did refund my money, so now I have 2 copies of 2 kind of rare PS4 games without any cases. So I got to get on eBay and find some cases, but they were free, so hard to complain about that. It's kind of weird. Let's see, what else? I saw Sonic 2. It was, no joke, the most ridiculous movie I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen a lot of 80s movies, including all the Pee Wee Herman movies. Mm-hmm. That said, that is probably a good thing because it's a Sonic movie. It's about a blue hedgehog from space. And, I saw it with my 6-year-old son. He is obsessed with Sonic, and we had a blast and had a bunch of sugar. So can't go wrong there. What? Oh, I bounced off. Sorry, we're kind of rambling here in the beginning, but so I bounced off Final Fantasy's Strangers of Paradise. When I decided to quit that game, I felt happiness come back into my life. I'm not saying it's a bad game, it just wasn't for me. But I do have a question for you and or the listeners. How do you think they figure out which Final Fantasy games get numbers? Because none of them seem connected to me other than Chocobos.
Well, they're not. They're all independent stories. I thought originally it was based on whether or not Hironobu Sakaguchi was the producer.
But he's not part of it anymore, right?
He left after 10.
Mm-hmm.
But they basically have had a lot of continuity, for him not being producer. Like they've still had a consistent crew there. And I think in the 80s and 90s, it might have been a little bit fuzzier what they allowed to have the Final Fantasy name and what they didn't. Because, like, Chrono Trigger was Hironobu Sakaguchi also, and, like, half of the Final Fantasy crew. So, Robotrek, what was that? Was Robotrek Hironobu Sakaguchi? It's a very, very close to a Final Fantasy game, right? So, like, some of the other series, like Legend of Heroes, like that, for a long time, it was like the same producer. Mm-hmm. It was pretty easy to tell. Like that's how it was structured. But even like Zelda, I guess the producers changed. Like, I mean, Nintendo, I suppose Zelda is a little bit less ambiguous because it's always the same lead character. Whereas Final Fantasy, every single story is an independent story except for the sequels.
And Zeldas don't have numbers, really.
Right. They gave up on numbering after 2. So, yeah, I always assumed it was due to who the producer was, at least early on. And then there's a lot of other things that are just kind of slightly different games that they stuck the Final Fantasy name on, but they're kind of just RP, like the Game Boy games, right? Final Fantasy Legends or whatever it was called.
Yeah, probably the Explorer
but those were probably
series.
Different producer, is my guess, if you looked into it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's how much they cost to make.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, but all the arguments I'm making would still get you to like Chrono Trigger being Final Fantasy VII. So, yeah. So I don't have a great answer.
It's Final Fantasy is that series that I really want to love, but I liked Final Fantasy Remake. I thought, or Final Fantasy VII Remake, I thought Strangers of Paradise would be close to that, but it was just a little bit too difficult for me, and I didn't care about the characters at all like I did in Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah. Well, and like the creator of Final Fantasy went on to create a game. He has a new game out on iPhone that's, I guess, is a big hit. But he did something on Wii called The Last Story, which really, if you just called that Final Fantasy 12 or whatever, wherever it would have been in that time period, no one would have known the difference.
Really strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. From, I'm an outsider in Final Fantasy. So yeah, I'm just dipping my toe in now. It's very, very confusing. Other than
Right. And then you have
Chocobos.
things like X2 and all the 7 sequels. So
Yeah. Wait, there's 7?
no, there's a bunch of Final Fantasy 7 prequels and sequels. And Final Fantasy X has Final Fantasy X2, which is a direct sequel. That's not Final Fantasy 12. That's Final Fantasy 10 Part 2.
Yeah. Yeah, there's another podcast I listened to where they were debating where, do you consider Final Fantasy numbered games sequels? And I think no, simply because X2 exists. That's a sequel. But Final Fantasy 8 is not a sequel to 7. It's just...
No, not even close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like another series that works like this, like in any other media even. I mean, like Halloween was originally... that's why Halloween 3 is so different, because the producer wanted to shift it to being like a seasonal Halloween movie.
Okay.
Like just a seasonal scary movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And they tried that with Halloween 3 and nobody liked it, so they switched back to it being all sequels.
The only thing I could think of, maybe American Horror Story. Have you seen any of those shows?
I've seen one season, but each season is its own story, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's as close as I could get, though. Yeah, that's all I got. We had a lot of... that was almost a topic right there.
Yeah.
So I guess we have some very quick news items this week. Not a lot going on. But
yeah, so I will just run through them, and if there's any you want to talk about, we'll talk about them.
Cool.
We have Vectrex Mini, which is a hack, not an actual product, unfortunately. Someone added ray tracing to Doom, and there is a new Monkey Island game coming out this year, possibly, confirmed by Ron Gilbert.
I'll just touch on him going backwards. Ron Gilbert announced it on April Fool's, which I thought was great.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. The Doom ray tracing looks really cool. Literally, it just looks cool. Mm-hmm. And that's it. Vectrexes are neat. That's about it. That was... Yeah. Do you have a Vectrex?
I don't know. No, I've never found one. And I definitely didn't own one back in the day. I don't even remember seeing one in a store in the 80s. I mean, I don't recall seeing a Vectrex in person until like I went to gaming conventions as an adult.
Yeah, I want to say like 2010 is the first time I saw one.
Yeah, like I don't remember them being in demo units in stores even. Now, again, the only big box store we went to when I was a kid was the Army Exchange, right? Mm-hmm. Which, if you've never been to one, it's just a super Walmart, but the only people there are in the Army. Right? I'm serious. That's basically the best way. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah.
And they had video games and computers, but it was just like one thing. Like they had NES at one point. They had Amigas. Far back in the 80s, they definitely didn't have Vectrex.
I don't remember ever seeing them in a store. Only in retro stores now.
Yeah, maybe you're just shop at some fancy high-end electronics. And they probably, some of these old, old 80s systems, like they'd only be in big cities at first. Like they wouldn't get into smaller towns or even medium-sized towns until they, had been established a little bit. Uh-huh. So it's possible like you only saw the Vectrex like in Chicago or in LA or New York.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. Really strange. It's definitely a sought-after item now. But, yeah, that was all our quick news. So we have a topic. I brought this to Hugh out of some frustrations I had recently, and Hugh happened to be kind of maybe an expert in it, so we thought it was a perfect topic. Well, you know what I mean.
I'm not an expert in anything. Let's just be very clear here.
You've put thought into it. Let's say that. Yeah. So our topic is just a backwards compatibility discussion of older systems to modern systems, and I just wanted to. Did you want to intro it at all, or was that enough?
No, I mean, we wanted to talk a little bit about backwards compatibility. I think there's where I look at some of the things on the show notes, like the definition of backwards compatibility is really, um, really hard to get right. I don't know. I mean, there's probably like a Wikipedia definition. I've always used the definition of, I can take the physical media from a company's previous system and put it in a later system and it works. Which is different than system A can play system B, although we are going to talk about that a little bit. But then my whole, like, getting on a high horsepower physical media kind of, as we'll see when you get into later generations, doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Because now we're getting to places where it's like I buy a bunch of games virtually. When I upgrade to the newer system, I can still play them.
Yeah, whether it's streaming or actually downloadable compatibility. Yeah. But let me just hit these quick weird ones first that barely fit into this. And I just wanted to mention Mac OS Classic to OS X had they're both PowerPC. Yeah, they had that Cocoa and Carbon layers that would help people use their backwards or their older Mac Classic apps and games, and I did it and it worked great actually. And then from PC to Intel, they had Rosetta, so you could buy a new Intel Mac and still play PC or PowerPC applications. And then most recently from Intel to Apple Silicon, they have Rosetta 2, which is all the same. And then kind of to add to that on the computer side, a lot of times when you move from 286 to 386, 386 to 486, you had a turbo button on your computer. And a lot of people thought, why the heck would I ever not have that engaged? And that was because older computers often didn't have a internal clock. So however fast your computer went is how fast the application or game went. And sometimes it made the game run so fast it was not playable. So you would disengage turbo and run at half speed. So
yeah, I kind of feel like computers are like kind of a different beast. You go back to like the early Apple II, Commodore 64 to 128. I mean, I think there was an expectation that if you upgraded your computer or bought a newer generation, that previous things would work because you were spending such a huge amount of money. And with game systems, they would change the cartridge shape, and there maybe wasn't always that expectation.
yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of why the Mac. I mean, one of the many reasons why the Mac almost failed upon launch, because it really couldn't do the Apple II stuff, and everyone had an Apple II and Apple II software. They're invested in it. And, I kind of consider the Apple II GS like the first real Mac, but that's a whole different story. But yeah, going into consoles, you want to take us into some consoles?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess we got to go all the way back to the one that's really confusing to me is like there was the Odyssey and there was the Odyssey 2, but the Odyssey didn't have cartridges. So that one kind of doesn't make any sense. So yeah, Atari was probably I guess would be the first. So when I say Atari was the first to offer like an upgrade of their system, I mentioned the Odyssey because someone will say, well, what about Odyssey 1 to 2? So Atari obviously had a big hit back in the 70s and 80s with the 2600. Eventually things were starting to get kind of stale. And at that point, like Mattel already and Coleco, I guess, had made systems that were definitely technically superior to the 2600. So they launched the Atari 5200. And originally the 5200 was not backwards compatible. But they did later on release an adapter. So you could, again, 5200 cartridges are not anywhere close to the same shape as 2600.
I'm not sure I knew there was an adapter.
Yeah, so it was an adapter, right? So you could at least now play all these 2600 games that you piled up. It didn't matter though that the 5200 totally bombed, right? But then when Atari went and released the 7800, right, that used the same cartridge style as the 2600 and was just like natively backwards compatible. Like I feel like Atari was like apologizing for not doing that the first time.
Yeah, yeah.
Matter of fact, I bought the main reason I have a 7800 is to use it as a 2600. Like the 7800 is the best 2600, I think.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It took me probably 20 years to realize that 2600 plus 5200 was 7800.
Mm.
That should have been in our discussion on things you didn't know. You just learned about a system you've had.
But now that's confusing because now you would think the 7800 could play 5200, but whatever. um, and then kind of the next big one was, I think, Sega Master System to Genesis, right? So the Master System, at least in the US, did not compete very well against the NES. It didn't like bomb, but it was, what, 1% market share compared to NES, something
Something
along
like
those lines.
that. Yeah.
And Sega then released a new system, Sega Genesis, of course, and that contained the same CPU as the Sega Master System. It contained a lot of the same hardware, really. They've reused a pretty good amount of the hardware overall, but it was different style cartridges and different CPU. And Sega did something similar to the 5200, and they released an adapter so you could play Master System games and even the Master System chip games, which were very, very few and far between, right?
Uh-huh.
It could play both of those on the Sega Genesis, which I kind of feel like was a really, really smart idea because the Master System was a big distant second. And I think to some people, the idea that, oh, I can play this other system that I'm aware of and I've seen some games that look kind of cool. I think that was actually a good selling point for the Sega Genesis. Like I can get all these new games and then all these kind of like, things like Phantasy Star and Alex Kidd and things that I know are good, but I didn't want to buy a separate system to play.
Yeah, yeah. You could play all your old games and Altered Beast.
Yes. After you spent 15 minutes beating Altered Beast the first time you played it, you could then go play something else.
Yeah.
Nintendo kind of went a different route at first. They released the Super Nintendo, which was not backwards compatible. And I know there's probably some bootleg adapters out there, but there's no official adapter. And I think that was Nintendo largely wanting to kill their other system. Like they had this hugely successful system, and if the Super Nintendo had an adapter to play Nintendo games, a lot of companies would probably still just keep making Nintendo games.
Huh, yeah.
Right? Because you still have a place you can sell them, and I think they wanted to move on and kill off their 8-bit system. I don't know if anyone has ever seen like a real stated reason from Nintendo for why they did that, but that seems to be the reason. Obviously, with handhelds, Nintendo has had the exact opposite approach.
Yeah, that's strange.
It is, yeah. Game Boy, and then when they moved to Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Color could play all the Game Boy games, and Game Boy Advance could play up to a point. I don't believe Game Boy Advance Micro can play Game Boy games, but Game Boy Advance could play the previous generation of games. And the DS could play Game Boy Advance, but not Game Boy and Game Boy Color.
Oh, I forgot about that. That it's not Game Boy on the DS.
It's just Game Boy Advance. It would play, and I don't know why they did that for their handhelds. I think perhaps they viewed a lot of their handhelds as being for younger gamers, and that parents are probably more likely to complain that the system doesn't play the games they already have than adults are. Like if I buy a new handheld system, I pretty much am not counting on playing the previous handheld system games on it. But if my kid, breaks their Game Boy Advance and I have to replace it with the DS, then I would like it to play the advanced games.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah.
That's kind of how I see it. But maybe there's some sort of backwards compatibility historian at Nintendo that can fix that. And then, we kind of entered an era after that where like the next wave of systems did not think about backwards compatibility at all, right? Obviously, the PlayStation could not be backwards compatible with anything because it was a new system. But the Nintendo 64, not backwards compatible, and didn't even have adapters to play like the Game Boy games like the Super Nintendo did.
Mhm.
Sega Saturn did not play. It had a cartridge slot in a CD player. It did not play Sega Genesis or Sega CD games. I don't know why Sega did that. It
Well,
could be that it would have cost too much to include the Sega Genesis hardware, and they didn't know how to emulate Sega Genesis on the Saturn. I mean, the Saturn was very different hardware, so it probably wasn't feasible.
if yeah, you go back and you read old Electronic Game Monthly or GamePro or whatever, before the Saturn came out, everyone thought that cart slot was backwards compatibility, at least with the 32X.
Yeah. Well, and at least, so no, there were also rumors early on, probably from that QEGM guy, the EGM QAnon guy. What was his name?
G-Man, right? Q-Man? Something
Q-Man,
man? Yeah,
something like
Q-Man,
that.
yeah.
But there were rumors, because I remember working in the game store, that the
Quarterman,
Saturn was
yeah.
equivalent to buying a Genesis, Sega CD, and 32X altogether.
Exactly. That's what everyone thought, except
Yeah.
maybe a little bit upgraded.
Right. So, well, no, but like I think people thought if I have all of these accessories, I'll be able to play Saturn games like on this combo.
Oh,
So, whatever. Did not pan out that way. And then Sega's next release was the Dreamcast, which Saturn backwards compatibility probably wouldn't have been a great selling point. Um, the Saturn got pretty soundly crushed by the PlayStation, and most stuff that you wanted to play on the Saturn was cross-platform, outside of a few Sega exclusive games.
and people really liked the Dreamcast, and having Saturn compatibility would have made it, I think, even, people would have liked it even more. And again, the only thing that would have saved that system would have been DVD playback. But there's Sega repeating themselves a few times after they kind of proved that backwards compatibility helped sell the Genesis. It's kind of strange how they just started making that mistake over and over again after they they got it right the first time.
Yeah, and I just wonder how much of it was hardware, because for the Saturn to play Genesis, you probably would have had to put a 68,000 in there. To do Sega CD, you need two 68,000 chips.
Mm.
And then maybe a few other things to handle some of the co-processors that you're missing.
The 32X, they would have had a cable come outside and then back in, and 3 different adapters.
Well, if I could just hook up the 32X to the Saturn, like if that Saturn had a Genesis cartridge slot, that would be wild.
That would be crazy.
Yeah. No. Not meant to happen.
That is funny.
And then of course PlayStation 2 came out, and that was just, you could just drop a PlayStation disc in. It probably, that did not help the PlayStation 2 sell at all, because the PlayStation 1 was already the dominant system.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of a nice gesture. And PlayStation 1 games do kind of look better on the PlayStation 2, I think.
And what is it? The PlayStation 2 used the PlayStation 1's processor as a sound chip or something?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah.
But on the PS2 Slim, I'm pretty sure they removed that compatibility, just like they did.
I play PlayStation 1 games on the Slim.
There is a version.
There was like the white PlayStation 2 Slim. Maybe that's because I have the gray PlayStation 2 Slim. So it could be like the last hardware iteration they did that with.
Okay. Yeah, there was one where it did not work with.
The thing that's weird is that the memory cards are a different format, so you can't use the same memory card for both PS2 and PS1 saves.
Okay, that's weird.
Yeah, they must have changed. They probably changed the OS, so it's a block size or something, right? Because memory cards got bigger, so now you could have something better for the PS2. I don't know. And then you have Xbox, obviously nothing for it to be backwards compatible with, and then GameCube switched to a CD format, so really no chance of it playing cartridge games. and it was a very small compact system, so they didn't want to add extra hardware to it. And then, around the time that this generation of systems was coming out, you had a thing called emulators showing up, where now, instead of physically playing it, right, instead of having to have the physical hardware in your system, you could perhaps use software emulation to play it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw stuff like Bleem, for example, which again is like playing one thing on another. But it was proof that, through software emulation, you could play a previous generation system on a newer generation system.
Yeah, I mean, Proton is really the next generation of Bleem,
Right. In Sega, I mean, you could play Genesis games on the Dreamcast because Sega released collections of Genesis games on the Dreamcast.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, companies are starting to figure out, oh, well, we can emulate our previous generation of systems rather than add hardware, which is, the next wave, right? Xbox 360 was backwards compatible through software emulation. So you could put your Xbox game in, and some of them worked and others did not.
Mm-hmm.
But the most popular games seem to have worked, and the ones that don't work, I don't have the full list in front of me.
So let me touch in on that. So I've been buying a lot of Xbox and 360 games thinking, now this is me being an idiot, thinking I'm going to be able to play all these games and, on a new Xbox system, and it'll be great. I got like a lot of them that did work, but a few that didn't, like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I just thought like, hey, I'll geek out on these. There's some action adventure RPGs. What could go wrong with these? I think one of them's like a gauntlet. Like, cool, sounds great to me. Anyway, I put one in a system and it doesn't work. I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have researched this. So, how it works is Microsoft came up with a compatibility layer called Fusion from Xbox to 360, and it worked at two levels. They would recompile the textures and they would wrap the executable, and it ran on an emulator. So it's like an emulator that's using modified or wrapped executables that lets it easily upscale, usually run at full frames per second, and yada, yada, yada. Well, they couldn't do that with all games because of licensing and stuff like that. So from 360 to Xbox One and the newer series, they did the same thing again, but they called it Fission. So Xbox was a Pentium 3, Xbox 360 was PowerPC, and then all the new stuff is AMD. So some weird backwards compatibility there. It I think is a really cool idea, but it also angers me because you can't play them all, so you need this list. I wish I would have just added a software compatibility layer. If the game doesn't support Fusion or Fission, just run an emulator, but they didn't. And then while we're talking about the modern stuff, yeah, PS4 Pro plays fine on PS5 because it's just almost like a modern computer. It's just a newer chip with this newer GPU that's all by the same manufacturer. So that is easy peasy. Now, obviously, the PS3 is probably one of the most difficult systems to emulate. So I understand that not being in there, but now I guess you'll be able to stream some of them. But yeah, that was my rant about my stupidity in assuming that all 360 and Xbox games were backwards compatible.
No. So where did I leave? Oh yeah, so I think the next big backwards compatibility thing, I can't talk, was the GameCube Wii. To me, this is my favorite one because I actually used the Wii to catch up on a lot of GameCube games that I didn't finish. And that's another one where, the Wii finished third place in its generation. Wait, did I say the Wii? I didn't mean the Wii. You have to
The
cut this part.
GameCube.
The GameCube finished third in its generation.
Yes.
The Wii was first by a massive landslide. GameCube finished third. So I don't know Nintendo's logic, but I think they thought, oh, well, maybe that will be a selling point that you can now get some of these like critically acclaimed Nintendo exclusives and play them on the Wii. Like you could play Wind Waker, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say Twilight Princess, but they were already doing a Twilight Princess native version for it. But like Smash Brothers wasn't a Wii launch title, and Mario Kart wasn't a Wii launch title. And those are things people really, really wanted, but some people maybe didn't want to buy a separate system just to play Nintendo exclusives. But now you had this brand new system with like the hottest game of its time. I'm talking about Wii Sports, like everybody loved Wii Sports. And you could get that, and you could get all these older Nintendo exclusives that you missed on, right? I really think that helped the Wii a lot.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And again, the GameCube was 400 megahertz power PC, and the Wii is an 800 megahertz power PC. Pretty similar. I think they both used AMD GPUs. And for those listening to this thinking you could pick up a Wii and play old GameCube games, remember, only the Wiis that have the GameCube controller ports support it. The later Wii, there's a model that doesn't support it.
Yeah, the red one, right?
Yeah, there might even be more than that, but
okay.
Yeah, the red one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a couple GameCube games that crash hard on the Wii.
Really?
Phantasy Star Online crashes. Yeah, because it's the games that have online support, there's not very many. But I guess at startup, they do some hardware check to see if you have the modem connected or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that check just, rather than failing, just crashes.
So when it sees you have a Wi-Fi port instead of...
Well, I don't know what happens, but it doesn't work.
That's funny.
Just totally crashes, which is disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
But these weren't super popular games, so I guess it's not a big deal. But I mean, yeah, I definitely used the Wii to play GameCube games a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Wii U could play Wii games, but nobody cared because the Wii U did not do that well.
It didn't?
That's what I've heard, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I knew it's a virtual... its retro library did not play well, but I didn't know about the Wii.
No. Well, the Wii was sort of weird because like it plays the Wii in like the lowest resolution the Wii supports.
Oh, great.
And you actually go to like a fake Wii menu. Like you don't just put the Wii game in and play it. You actually go to like, you have to boot into Wii mode.
That is so strange. Wow.
Yeah, it's like a dual boot setup. It's bizarre. It's not, I just tried it out of curiosity. And it's not a good time. I would not use the Wii U to play Wii games. And then so finally, the one that probably changed my opinion on what qualifies as backwards compatibility, I guess, is the PSP Vita backwards compatibility. So the Vita does not have a UMD slot.
Mm-hmm.
But download games that you purchased for the PSP. And again, people weren't buying a lot of download games for the PSP because it used a very expensive Sony proprietary memory card,
mm-hmm.
which we talked about last episode. But there were some games that were like only available via download. Like they just never had a physical release.
Mm-hmm.
And when you bought your Vita, you could sign in and re-download those games and play them. Because the Vita could play all the download PSP games.
And are those similar in processor type? I don't even know.
I don't know, but PSP games play great on it.
It's like it turned into a PSP machine after a while.
So it's a good system. But that's where I started to think a little bit more about like, okay, so if I buy some digital Switch games and the Switch 2 comes out and they can play the digital games I bought, but not the physical games, would I say that's a backwards compatible system? I don't know. I mean, it is, and it kind of isn't. Does PS5, I don't have one, and I still have never seen one in person. Does that play your downloaded PS4 library, like games you bought virtually.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So I would definitely call that a backwards compatible system.
Oh yeah, definitely. And some of them come if there was a free PS5 update for it, it would also add that as well. Usually with a lot of times without even telling you, but yeah, that compatibility has been fantastic.
But the Switch itself, like I can't imagine if someone asked if the Switch had backwards compatibility, my question would be backwards compatibility with what?
Yeah.
Like the Wii U had 2 screens. Like it's clear the Switch, unless it, you can't use the Switch both like on the TV and off the TV at the same time. So Wii U backwards compatibility just could never happen. But that's all right because nearly every single Wii U game is on the Switch. You maybe could argue DS, but then also dual screen comes up again.
Yeah.
So like
yeah.
it's just, the question kind of doesn't make sense because the Switch is something different than the 2 Nintendo systems it's replacing.
Yeah, it kind of forgot about all those systems, and I guess some Wii U stuff might sometimes ported to it. But hey, I just looked up Vita versus PSP, and yeah, the Vita is an ARM processor, and the PSP is a MIPS processor, so they're not alike at all other than the main risk. So it's really strange how well that compatibility works.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Vita is substantially more powerful. It might be why.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, the Vita, like you're basically playing PS3 quality games on it. And the PSP is again, it's a very powerful handheld. You're playing near PS2 quality games on it.
Yeah, I mean that's at least a portable PS1, at least.
Well, yeah, I mean it had. I mean, we did Jackass the video game recently, right? Like Jackass on PSP doesn't really look a lot worse than Jackass on PS2.
Yeah, exactly.
I know it's not like a high-tech demo game, but if you just had streams of them going, I don't know if you could tell me which system is which.
Well, and the God of War on PSP, I thought looked great. It was a full 3D game that was, released on PS2. It looked great on PSP.
So. Yeah. Now the GTA games kind of struggle on it at times.
Yes, that is true. But those are pretty intensive. You wanted to mention Windows 10. My favorite of all these notes of ours is yours for Windows 10.
Well, yeah. So back in the day, it's hard to find these articles online because Microsoft like shuts down old blogs all the time. But there's a Microsoft developer named Raymond Chen who did a very long series on all the hoops Microsoft jumped through to make sure that Windows 95 could play like all the DOS and Windows 3.1 software that was on the market. Mm-hmm. So he has like a famous story about like the Microsoft managers went to the Best Buy near the Microsoft headquarters and just bought like one of every product, like literally just one of everything off the shelves. And then lined up all the boxes in the cafeteria and told the staff, you're free to take anything you want, but you can only run into Windows 95 and you have to file a bug report for every single thing that doesn't work.
Wow. That's a good idea.
Yeah, it worked. And one of the things he mentioned was like how there's code very deep in the Windows kernel that may still exist, or I should say very likely still exists in Windows 10, that checks specifically if SimCity for DOS is running. And I kind of messed up the details in the notes. I was reading it again. It has to do with like SimCity for DOS, and you have a certain amount of memory because once with DOS, you have like your physical memory and then your virtual memory, whatever, right?
Yeah, high and extended. Yeah.
High and extended memory, right? So SimCity for DOS had a bug where it would try to read extended memory that it had deallocated. So if think in programming terms, you say, I'm not using this memory anymore, deallocate it. And then like a second later, you actually try and read that memory back. So it just so happened that in DOS, your memory hasn't actually been deallocated. Like you say you've deallocated it, but DOS doesn't actually do anything about that. It means basically at some future time it could write into that memory again, but it doesn't like wipe it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Windows 95, when you're running a DOS game and you say, hey, deallocate this memory, Windows is like, okay, I'm going to go do that now. Right. And so SimCity had a bug, like where it would try to read this memory it freed, and on DOS, it just happened to work, but on Windows 95, it would crash. So Microsoft literally added code that checks if the process name matches SimCity for DOS, and if so, it changes how it handles extended memory allocation.
That is so strange, but awesome.
Well, because SimCity had to run on Windows 95. Like,
it was one of the hottest games. Yeah.
Yeah. You had no choice. So there's lots of little hacks buried into Windows like that. Yeah, and then we have another section here. We could do a whole episode on like systems that can play other systems, because I know I skipped over those.
Yeah, we could save them.
Yeah. And then my hot take on all of this is that I swear if the Atari Jaguar was backwards compatible with Atari's previous systems, at least the 2600, 7800, it would have been like 100 times better.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know if it would have moved any systems, but it would have been better.
Yeah, it would have moved some. I think it would have moved some.
Well, cool. I mean, I think the gist of this is backwards compatibility helps sell systems. I mean, I have a PS5 and an Xbox Series X, and I have both because of backwards compatibility. And I'm not buying a PS5 just to play PS5 games. I do have a stack of them now, and a lot of them are really good, but when I got the PS5, there's probably only like 5 games that I would have played. So backwards compatibility helps, and I think, you look at Sega, that doesn't exist in the hardware market anymore, probably due to some of those lack of backwards compatibility issues. So,
yes. And before we went to emails, no, we did not talk about the Intellivision, because I don't really think that counts. Like, Intellivision released multiple iterations of their hardware, but it's not like there's no such thing as an Intellivision 3 game.
Yeah.
It's just third revision of Intellivision hardware.
Yeah. It's kind of like a PSP to PSP Go or something.
Right.
Well, all right. Game Club. We're actually running a little bit long here.
Yeah.
But it's lucky we didn't have much news.
I don't have much to say about our games. So
I don't have much to say about either of them. So I'll just plow through mine. So Populous. Originally released in 1989. Who did this one? Bullfrog, and published by EA. It's a considered possibly the first God game. And yeah, you play as God, but you don't really control the people. The goal is to have everyone worshiping you, not the opposing deity. Mm-hmm. And you kind of do that by moving the landscape and making people like you and giving them what they need. And sometimes raining down, asteroids, earthquakes and whatnot, floods. And I played the Populous DS. I know a lot of you know that I am having a little romance with my 3DS lately. It's all I've been really playing. And so I definitely wanted to check out Populous on it, because I didn't really play it back in the day. I did load it up quickly in DOSBox and was like, what's going on here? I thought about doing one on the console, an older console than a 3DS, but I landed on this one. And it definitely has some updates from the original. It's made by Xseed, I think, at least in North America. And the scream that happens when you decide to invoke Armageddon, which is when the two gods decide their populations are fighting, is hilarious, and it never changes. And they decided that during Armageddon, the song that should play should be Ode to Joy. That's the song that plays.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's royalty free, so.
Yeah, so I don't know. People love this game. I thought it would be different than it was. I thought I would control the people more than you control the environment. And It is not what I thought it was. I guess Populous 2, a lot of people think that one really got it right, but I did not play that one. So I'm interested if any of our listeners played any of them, and if there's something I'm missing on it. But yeah, what did you think about it?
So real quick, before someone sends an email, I don't believe Xseed has ever made a game. I think they're a localization company only.
Oh, yeah.
So some Japanese company made Populous 2 and Xseed published it.
Yes.
In the US. I actually own that game and I still have yet to try it. My go-to version for this one is on Genesis, which is a pretty easy version to play. Like it works well with 3 buttons.
Mm-hmm.
There's no music or anything. The PC Engine version is on CD and has music, but with only 2 buttons, it's actually kind of a pain to play.
I hope Ode to Joy is on there.
I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it and find out. So that's kind of interesting. Like the difficulty sort of depends. Like there's a couple strategies that win every level. Like you almost never have to invoke Armageddon to finish the game. Because it's actually the game is overall pretty easy if you're playing against a computer. If this was like person versus person, maybe it's a little bit harder. But like so on some levels water is fatal, and other levels it isn't. And the levels where water is fatal, like it's really really easy to win. Like build your towns up really high, and then wait till you have enough power to do flood, and then flood a couple of times, because the computer doesn't ever think to put their people up higher.
Yeah, I forgot to mention the elemental part of that where, there's fire, earth, water, wind, and I think there's one more.
And some like volcano is actually kind of useless. I've never really thought that that's real helpful. The other approach is, you can do like the Crusader method where you like turn one of your humans into a Crusader. And that's actually they're pretty overpowered. You can go, loot all the towns. And then once you get down to a very small number of people, then I guess you could invoke Armageddon if you wanted, but you usually don't need to. And then the Genesis version, I forget how many levels there are, like 90 or something. I don't know, some large number. And what level you move to after you complete a level is based on how well the game thinks you did.
What?
Yeah, it's like you start on level 1, and depending on the strategy you use, you might go to level 2, or you might go to like level 9 next.
Interesting. I did not know that. Huh.
Yeah. I don't know if the PC version works that way or not.
Weird. Well, I don't think the DS port works that way, that's for sure.
Yeah. So it just but there's a password, so you can try and you can still do every level, you just have to know the passwords.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that's why I played a lot. And you can only play it on very original Genesis hardware, because EA tried to make games without Sega's involvement and didn't include the mandatory trademark copyright check that Sega started enforcing on the first iteration of Genesis hardware, or I guess the second iteration of Genesis hardware.
I love that.
So their game worked, and then a slight hardware revision. It didn't look any different, the same case and everything. And now their game doesn't work.
That is hilarious. So do you like Populous? Is this a game you enjoy?
I did. I don't really play much anymore.
Yeah, it didn't really age well for me.
Yeah, it looks like Theme Park kind of looks a lot like it. You can tell it's the same, there's a lot of cross-pollination, I guess. I mean, I liked it back in the day. It's not something I would sit down and play much today.
Yeah, I'm more of like a Civilization kind of player than this. What about Mappy-Land?
Yeah, it's okay, I guess. That's what I said. It's basically the arcade version, but now you have a jump button, which you could just also not have. The jump button's mostly so you can grab items, which could just be not at a height that you had to jump for them. So it's okay. I mean, if I bought this game for full price, I would have been pretty disappointed. But it's, on the Switch Online, it's okay for a few minutes. It's kind of neat to try out, but I only played it for a few minutes, and then I said, okay, it's kind of worse Mappy. it's maybe, I would definitely say it's better than Pac-Land. If you were going with arcade games with land added to the title. I my informal list of ranking arcade games with land added to the name. I could only find a couple of games though. I said best is Super Mario Land, and then Donkey Kong Land, then Mappy-Land. Then number 4 I have Getting Kicked by a Horse, and number 5 Pac-Land.
Yeah, it is, which you can now play on the Switch.
Yeah.
And I think you have to pay for it.
You could get kicked by a horse.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to do one of those things. Like you must play Pac-Land to completion, or I have a horse that's going to kick you.
Yeah. Yeah, Pac-Land is one of my least favorite, might be my least favorite side-scrolling platformer.
Yeah. I like the art style, but it is so miserable to play.
And now, and in that Switch port, yep, it's Pac-Mom that sends you off.
Yeah, and I think on the Pac-Man Museum Collection that I just pre-ordered.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I believe they are reskinning. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I believe they're reskinning any instances of Miss Pac-Man.
The pack that shall not be named. That is so funny. I just think that's so good. They had so many like lawyers and corporate meetings about this. It's just so stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I've had to work with lawyers quite a bit with, technology issues, and I can just imagine like you explaining to the lawyer how Pac-Mom is legally distinct from Miss Pac-Man.
Yeah. I just love it. It did have, back to Mappy-Land, it did have surprisingly good music. I was fond of the music, but again, I did not play it for very long at all, so I do not know how much it changes or how often it loops back. So I don't know if it gets annoying, but yeah, it's not bad. I think it's better than some more popular games. Like, if you put this against Adventure Island was more popular and people seem to really like that game, but Mappy-Land is arguably better. They're not similar games. I just hold them as in the same, what's the word I'm looking for? Caliber. Yeah, kind of caliber of programming, you know what I mean? Of gameplay. Like, they don't feel that great, but they're not horrible. And
yeah.
And another note I made here was, who is this game even for? It doesn't really feel like it's for kids, but it doesn't really feel like it's for teens or adults. It just kind of exists.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, I don't know who you're marking this game to. Maybe there was some region where Mappy was really popular. I mean, it was not unpopular in the US, but it wasn't like a smash hit. I don't think it was, it wasn't in the same regard as Pac-Man or anything. I think someone just trying to make a buck on a franchise they hope people recognized.
Yeah. And again, it's not horrible, but whatever. Well, what are you going to play next?
What am I going to I'm going to stick with the Switch Online thing, and I'm going to do, what did I put here? NES Open Tournament Golf, which is also on the Switch. I'm trying to try more of the games on the Switch online thing that I haven't played before.
Nice. I mean, hey, it works really well. Usually, yeah. Usually. There are some hiccups in there, but usually. Well, cool. I'm going to do Secret of Monkey Island. I'm going to play it on Steam and probably the special edition.
Okay. I have it on Sega CD and I believe floppy disk.
So we'll talk about that next time. I'm very curious on the Sega CD port on that. But yeah, if any of our listeners play NES Open Tournament Golf, Secret of Monkey Island, Mappy-Land, Populous, if you have any backwards compatibility stories or comments, if you love or hate the Vectrex, if you support ray tracing, and if you're excited for the new Secret of Monkey Island game, please email us. Email at retrogameclub.net. That is email at retrogameclub.net. And we have a few emails here.
We do, and in the interest of time, I might butcher them. I'm going to try not to. So, Majors writes in, he also had very bad experiences with GameStop online, or at least has heard many other horror stories. And of course, recommends going to your local mom and pop retro game store if you have one.
Agreed.
Yes, I don't have one too close. Tangent about being harassed by customers because of bogus release dates. So when he was a kid, he read about Gradius 3 being released on the NES and annoyed the people at Babbage's asking about Gradius 3. And it turns out it was not released. And when he went there to buy it, he ended up buying Adventures of Bayou Billy instead. He would have been better investing that money in something else. Bayou Billy is a neat concept for a game, but man, it is not fun.
It's becoming popular in the speedrunning scene. It's kind of fun to watch in that, but
oh, okay. It's a very repetitive game. The fighting in that game is so repetitive.
Oh yeah.
So back in November 2020, this was Game of the Month on the PC Engine Fans Forum. So that's the last time he played it. He said, he had played the original Master System, but the TG version, of course, completely blows it out of the water. And, having a second game basically for free is a great deal. And then he sent us some photos of a convention called Playthrough, which I've never been to. And that looks pretty cool. That is a many-player Bomberman.
Nice. Oh, yeah, I think Majors brings that a lot, right?
Yeah. The Saturn, whatever, is it 8-player or 16-player? Some absurd number of players.
10, yeah.
10, yeah. I played it once. It's
insane.
It's crazy. The layout of this is pretty similar to Midwest Gaming Classic, to the game room there. It's kind of a shame you have to put all these systems in like cages, though, because people are idiots. PlayStation 2 USB ports. Mentions the iToy, and for an old mod hack device called S-Box. And he can't remember what it works. I wouldn't tell you what it even did. I have to now look this thing up.
Yeah, I don't think I remember this either.
I remember the iToy. I remember that now. Midwestern Water Parks. Oh, yeah. He recommends a documentary called Class Action Park. And I'm mentioning this because I remember seeing this trailer before and not getting around to watching it. It's about a very dangerous water park, I believe.
Yeah, I have watched this, and it is fantastic. And Jason Scott is in it for like 90 seconds, which is kind of fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Reason for buying Dreamcast VGA box. So in the 2000s, he happened to acquire a 27-inch NEC multi-sync CRT that had a 640 by 480 mode. And the Dreamcast on it was pretty incredible. And it kept the monitor portion was square, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything looked exactly as you intended. And he sent us a picture of the Naki VGA box, which is it's a orange transparent plastic look. And then yeah, so his criticism of Populous is a lot like yours, that the people just kind of do their own thing.
Yeah.
You don't control the people. You kind of give them vague orders and then they go off and do their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, if I played longer in Mappy-Land, also there are spooky and jungle stages. I guess I may have to fire it up again because I'm curious about the spooky stage at least.
Yeah. I read a little bit about it after I stopped playing it. Yeah, there's some weird stages in there.
Yeah, I just didn't get into it. I played through the first 2 stages. French Pet has a funny one here about features you didn't know about on your console. So he has a Switch connected to a projector that is 10 feet away from the wall. Up until this weekend, he's had an audio cable running from the projector to the amp. It's really annoying because you have to adjust the volume in 2 places. He thought about using the Bluetooth adapter or something else. And then he thought, geez, it would be really great if the Switch, headphone jack worked in dock mode. But then it turns out it actually does. He had just assumed that you could not use the Switch headphone jack while it was docked.
Which makes sense,
Yeah, I would assume you could not also. Because why would you ever want to do that except for, I guess, this situation where you're hooking it up to an amp?
Yeah. Then it's like a Genesis situation.
And then Eric from Pacific Northwest sends us a photo of his Blaze Dreamcast VGA adapter. I think Blaze is the same company that made this crazy like memory card reader adapter that I bought that only works with Windows ME and through the serial port.
Weird.
This is one of my, like, if I ever just have unlimited free time projects, it's going to be attempting to figure out how to use my Blaze. Yes, it's like this little round box and has slots for like Game Boy cartridges and Dreamcast maybe not Dreamcast, but PlayStation memory card and a bunch of other formats, like, so you can read them on your computer.
So you might end up being the first person ever to create a virtual machine of Windows Me.
I already have. I have one of those already.
That's funny.
How dare you? I, of course, have Windows ME virtual machine. Have you ever tried the @Gamers Legend Mini? He asks. I guess this is like the giant Pac-Man joystick.
No,
and you
I have
can load
not.
your own games on it. No, I've never tried it. I think I looked at it once and didn't like the game selection. Listener feedback online. Jim from the Pie Factory podcast thinks Populous is the best game ever made.
Wow. I mean, hey, a lot of people love that game. A lot of people love Populous.
Yeah, and again, if whether you played it on PC or console probably changes your opinion of the game a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have a lot of like social media feedback. I'm not gonna get all of them. But I did like the features you didn't know about feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Genesis RGB output without any modding. That's a good one. That you can undelete files from your PS1 memory card.
That one I did not know.
Yeah, I assume it just works like an old hard drive, right? Like it probably just removes
The
when you
header.
delete the file, it probably just deallocates the pointer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you save something new, it could get overwritten. But if you don't save anything new, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If it's, I think it's fat. If it's a fat like file system, that's how it would work.
Yeah.
For short version is, again, file allocation table is like, your old DOS format. I don't know what PS memory card uses. Probably not fat, but probably something very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And on fat systems, when you delete a file, they aren't really deleted. It's just the table that maps, that's mapping out where things are stored on your hard drive no longer references those addresses, but the data has not been erased from the disk.
Mm-hmm.
This is why when you upgrade hard drives, I usually keep one generation of hard drives, and then your old hard drives, you like literally need to shatter the platters.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now I'm not doing anything illicit. It's just like I have private data, tax returns and stuff like that on there, right? Like you have to destroy those platters. Here's one I didn't know. Blowing into the microphone on your 3DS causes the game icons to spin.
I did not know that either, and I'm going to go try that in about an hour here.
I am never going to try that. Who asked about retro gaming haikus?
I think Zach
did.
did.
Come up with this?
Yeah.
There's a lot. Do you want to do a couple of these?
Yeah, I'll do a few. I'll start with Raftronaut, who does one of our themes. Mega Man is blue, Dr. Wily will not win, Robot Masters fail. Let's see. Mick the Nerd, Galaga gets ship, I blast Galaga, get ship blows up, repeat. The Padukan podcast, Mad Gear kidnapped Jess, must strap on a suspender to hold up my pants. What else here? I'll do Blue Williams. Tetris Type B was doing a shared universe way before Marvel.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'll pick one more at random here. I'm going to do two more here.
Okay.
Because in the interest of time, sorry we're not reading them all, but we're going way over on this one.
We're way over, and this got a lot of responses. So
Yeah. Let's see. I will do Doodle World, a great new retro game. Doodle World is fun. Be Evil King Eraser, get all the crayons. That is great. And let me pick one more here. Games with Coffee. At the speed of sound, Sonic's running to the top, as in days of old. I tried to read that one like a real haiku should be read.
Okay.
So thank you, Zach, for doing all our social stuff. He probably works harder than we do. We say that all the time. And thank you all for a lot of responses on a lot of these. Sorry, this is one of the few times we ran out of time, but we like talking about backwards compatibility. And we didn't even really have a news section this week. So, yeah, a lot of discussion this time. So
yeah, there you go.
Thank you, everyone, for emailing and participating and playing games with us. And what do we got for next week again? What did we pick? I'm doing Secret of Monkey Island. What are you doing?
The whichever golf game is on the Switch online.
Cool.
For NES Classic. So it's NES Open Tournament Golf. I originally thought it was basic Nintendo Golf, but it's actually the more advanced one.
Nice.
I think it's a fairly late NES release.
Yeah, I think so too. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about them. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for listening.